Good morning. It's great to see all of you. And as we get started, a couple of things. First of all, Polo and Rosie Andrade wish to be seen as members of this church family. So would you like to stand so we know who you are? Welcome to our family. Also, we have an opportunity. If you ever want to do something fun, look up in the Bible hospitality. Because hospitality, it might not seem like much, but it is actually one of the facets of life in which followers of God show themselves as hospitable. And on Tuesday, June 21st, we have the opportunity to be hospitable to about 55 college kids coming down from Dallas who are a part of the Saltines group at Dallas Christian College. They're doing a performance down here on Tuesday. They need a place to crash, and then they're heading out the next day going from here to El Paso. I've done that drive. It is long. But they need a place to stay. So they contacted us and saying if we could put them up. And so there's a sign-up sheet across from the photos. If you are willing to keep some college kids in your... Oh, high school. I'm sorry. Then why are they at Dallas Christian College?
That's the way they get them recruited.
Oh, okay. High school kids. In your house, again, we need housing for about 55. If we still have overflow, some can crash up here. We do have space. I just don't know if we have space for that many. So there is a sign-up sheet in the foyer across from the picture board. Also, before their performance on Tuesday night, they have requested a meal. So we also have the opportunity to provide a meal about at 5:30. On that Tuesday as well. There's a sign-up sheet for that as well if you would like to bring something or help organize a meal. So all the info, the breakdown of how many boys, how many girls, how many sponsors and whatnot is all unsigned. Please go check it out and let's come together and house some kids in a couple of weeks. Alrighty. Have you ever committed a social faux pas? That's a fun word to say. Faux pas. Say it with me. See, wasn't that fun? One more time. There you go. Wake up now. Have you ever committed a social faux pas? If you don't know what that is, that's an oops. All right, that's a big oops. You know, if you walk into a crowded room surrounded by people in suits and you're trailing toilet paper on your back heel of your shoe, you know that's a big oops right there. You know that's not nice. Or if you comment your host on their fabulous mustache and then you realize that's the host's wife. That's a big oops right there. You don't want to do that. All right, that's not nice. You know, you comment on the fabulousness of their pate, and then they tell you, no, that's the cat food. You know, I mean, it's these types of things. Those are the big oops right there. You don't want to do that. Well, in Daniel 5, King Belshazzar, committed a big oops. He did a faux pas. Now, he was the king of the Babylonian Empire sometime after Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the way the Bible reads, people say, well, this was his son. Well, this is one of those things historians argue about. Does father in this case mean direct descendant, dad, or some sort of ancestor, grandfather, great-grandfather? You know, it's one of those things we can argue about. But sometime after the king Nebuchadnezzar died, King Belshazzar came to power. Now, let's talk about a little bit about Babylon and what Nebuchadnezzar was able to build. We have a map of the Babylonian Empire. Now, this is the Babylonian Empire, and if you know anything of world geography, you got the Mediterranean Sea. To the west, you got the Black Sea up north, Caspian Sea, and also the Persian Gulf. And all this is encompassed in the Babylonian Empire. Now, as history goes on, bigger empires will come down the pike. And so in comparison to Rome, for example, that might not look that impressive. But to be honest, for that particular date and that particular time, that was huge. And so Nebuchadnezzar had a whole lot of power and a whole lot of wealth. How wealthy was Nebuchadnezzar, and how much wealth was he able to sink? Not just the empire of Babylon, but into the city of Babylon. Well, consider this. The city of Babylon, the capital of the empire, is described as such. In the form of a square, 14 miles on each side, and of enormous magnitude. The brick wall was 56 miles long, 300 feet high, 25 feet thick, with another wall 75 feet behind the first wall, and the wall extended 35 feet below the ground. 250 towers that were 450 feet high. A wide and deep moat that encircled the city. The Euphrates River also flowed through the middle of the city. Ferry boats and a half-mile-long bridge with drawbridges closed at night. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the wonders of the ancient world, and water was raised from the river by hydraulic pumps. 8 massive gates that led to the inner city, and 100 brass gates. Streets were paved with stone slabs, 3 feet square. The Great Tower, or Ziggurat as it's called, and 53 temples, including the Great Temple of Marduk, and 180 altars to Ishtar. A golden image of Baal and the golden table, both weighing over 50,000 pounds of solid gold. Nebuchadnezzar's palace was considered to be the most magnificent building ever erected on earth, complete with 2 golden lions, a solid gold human figure, each 18 feet high. Yeah, there's some wealth there. So if you came to power in Babylon, you would have the feeling that indeed you are the center of the universe. And you control everything that is around you. You can do anything you want, and nobody will even try to stop you. Power in its purest form. Why has Americans fought so hard to not allow royalty or dictators from taking over our country? It's because, thanks be to God, we have not had to deal with one person wielding unlimited total power. And we need to thank God for that. Because that's what the word means. A dictator, an emperor, can do anything they want to do, anytime they want to do it, and it is okay with everybody. Until they're assassinated or something. But that's the power they wield. And so with it comes this attitude of, it doesn't matter. This is what I want to do. I will do it. King Belshazzar comes to power, and he decides to throw a party, and in which he invites 1,000 of his closest friends. But unfortunately, they ran out of the red Solo plastic cups, and so they needed to have more drinking instruments. So Belshazzar has the fabulous idea. King Nebuchadnezzar sacked the Jewish temple, in which there were all sorts of gold and silver goblets. Let's go and bring them up, and we will share those with those who still need a cup to drink out of. Fabulous idea. Let's go. There's a problem. Not yet on that one. There's a problem. The problem is, these gold and silver cups of the temple have been dedicated to God. They have been deemed holy. They have been sprinkled with blood for temple use only, and for the worship practices of God. And so now this guy, this upstart, gets all these cups, brings them to the party, they fill them up, and they start drinking out of it, toasting the gods of gold and silver, wood and bronze. Taking the cups that were dedicated to God and using them to toast false gods. But again, what does he know about God? He thought this was going to be totally okay. As the party continues, this disembodied hand floats through the room. At this point, you see a bunch of people drinking, and they stop, look at the hand, look at their cup, and then pour out whatever's in the cup. And the hand starts writing on the wall. And great fear comes to everybody in the room, particularly Belshazzar. Because as we find out, he has no idea what was written on it. None. The word goes out that Belshazzar needs this message translated. And whoever is able to translate this message will be robed in purple, have a gold chain put around their neck, and be the third most powerful person in the Babylonian Empire. So the call goes out, and no one can read it except for our good old friend Daniel. Flip over to Daniel 5. Daniel 5 and verse 18. Daniel 5 and verse 18. You know, it's interesting. This isn't the first time that God is humbling somebody of Babylonian royalty. In fact, if sometime you're able to go back and read Daniel 4, you get to read about how God humbled Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Daniel's going to reference that in what we're about to read, but the full account takes place in Daniel 4. Now, listen to what God is going to say to this most powerful person in the Babylonian Empire, and how he speaks to this man. Verse 18. O king, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the peoples and nations and men of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted. And those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was disposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys and ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. Yes, God drove Nebuchadnezzar crazy because he got too puffed up with pride. Aren't we glad we don't have people in power who are prideful today? Verse 22. But you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines, drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you do not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. This is what the words mean. Mene. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Paris. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple. A gold chain was placed around his neck. And he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom for a day. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Bam! One night. An empire fell and another one took its place. One night! Belshazzar was taken out by God. Okay. What's going on here? What's this about? It's about remembering who we are, remembering our place in the world. Belshazzar was an emperor, and his father, a descendant, Nebuchadnezzar, was an emperor before him. And both of them tried to approach God in their own ways with pride. After all, they're an emperor. They control an empire made up of different lands and different peoples and different ways of life. They were able to acquire this empire through the conquest of war, in which they're able to take over various lands that they wanted. They own them now. But still, that did not place them above or in the same place as God. What happened to Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4 was that one day Nebuchadnezzar looks out his balcony window and surveys his great city that we just described, and he said, "Look at what I have been able to do." Took all pride upon himself after he has been introduced to God. God drove him crazy, and he lived like a wild man for 7 years. Until he came to his senses, humbled himself, and gave thanks to God. Belshazzar throws a party in which he's going to use God's goblets to toast gods that don't exist. Haman comes along, writes on the wall, and tells them, "You are going to lose your nation this night, because you had the same pride and ego that Nebuchadnezzar had, but you're not as repentant. It's going to be taken away from you." And it was. As high as people get in life through position or career or power or influence, we are still people. And we are temporary. Someone once said, the cemeteries are filled with busy people. There comes a time in which all the power and all the influence that we have, we will have to give back. We don't get to keep it forever, because we are here on a very temporary basis. Very temporary. Some of us are able to last longer than others, but still, all of us are very temporary people. You might have heard this, might not. I don't follow the show, so I had no idea who this kid was. But this past Friday, some young 22-year-old girl from The Voice was killed at an autograph signing. Hearing what people said about it, apparently she had a career ahead of her. Gone. It is time we focus on something else. If we dedicate ourselves towards position, towards power, towards influence, towards whatever I can be in this life, we are extremely short-sighted. Because whatever we are able to amass here, we do not get to take with us. Are we preparing for our futures with God? Now, Belshazzar, he was a pagan. He was a hardcore pagan. But again, he crossed the line when he used God's holy stuff from the temple. So yeah, but he wasn't king of Israel. Actually, technically he was, because Israel at this time was part of the Babylonian Empire. Yeah. That meant certain responsibilities when it came to approaching God. Pride and ego can jump on us very suddenly and very quickly and trick us into thinking, well, you know what? The world would never be able to do without me. Yes, it will. And one day it will. This isn't a lesson that's supposed to bring us down. This is supposed to be a lesson that's based on reality. And it's reality that, you know what? We see it everywhere, but for some reason we think it will never happen to us. One day the world will have to do without us. One day everything that we are on this earth will not mean much, because we're not here anymore. And the only thing that will matter is how we carried our relationship with God. That's it. That's the only thing that will matter. Back in the period of time, the Middle Ages, they had types of plays called morality plays. And I remember when I was in school, we actually got to read one in literature, and it was called Everyman. And if you like literature as much as me, particularly older stuff, you might have heard of Everyman. Everyman starred a guy called Everyman. And it's supposed to be a representation of all of us. And being a morality play, it was supposed to teach us something. Well, the time came for every man to die. And so death comes for every man. And every man says, well, I don't mind dying, but may I bring some of my friends with me? And death says, only certain friends are able to come with you. And I will tell you which. So every man goes out to find his friends. The first friends he finds is Power. He says, Power, come with me as I go to the land of the dead. And Power says, I cannot do that, for that there is nothing for me in that land. So then he goes to Possession. Possession, come with me, for I am about to die. I need you to go with me to the land of the dead. And Possession says, I cannot go with you, for there is nothing for me in that land. He goes to Friends. Friends, come with me, for I am about to die. I need you to go with me. Says, it is not yet time for us to make that journey. You must go alone. And so every man turns to death and says, well, who am I able to take? Go find love. And go find peace. And in essence, he breaks down some of the fruits of the Spirit that he is able to take with him to the land of the dead. And the morality should be clear. All this stuff in which we think is so important in life, we will not be able to take with us. You know, we have Clinton and Trump throwing names at each other and trying to put on airs to make themselves look like they're such powerful people. Guess what? There will be a day in which they die, and all of their power and all their influence and everything that they were will stay here, and they will stand naked before God as they truly are. And it's true with all of us. There will come a time in which we will leave all of our physical self behind and stand before God as Spirit, where the only thing that will matter is that relationship between us and God. What are we going to be taking with us? There was a movie that came out several years ago called Kingdom of Heaven. You might have seen it. Starred Orlando Bloom. This was one of Ridley Scott's tries at rewriting history. If you're a history buff, don't watch Ridley Scott movies. He never gets it right, but you know, it's Hollywood. But it's still a good show, you know, if you like you know, battle movies, war movies, that sort of thing. There comes a point in time in which the Crusaders who are in control of Jerusalem has to go out and fight Saladin. Well, they don't have to. They're tricked to by Saladin. Saladin is taunting them, and he's going to draw them out. Now, if you can imagine this, okay? you see what Orlando Bloom up there is wearing. He's wearing chainmail. Underneath the chainmail is padding. On top of the chainmail is the tunic. They also wear these helmets. In other words, these guys are wearing a whole bunch of metal, and it's heavy. Saladin is taunting the armies of Jerusalem to come out to fight him. Now, where are they fighting? They're fighting in the vicinity of Jerusalem, which is what? Desert and hot. All right? So these guys are being tricked to ride out many miles into a desert where there is no water and metal. And you see them going. Now, this part is actually, they actually did this part historically accurate, at least as close to it as anything else. And you see guys going out to this battle, and they're just dropping dead on the way because of heat exhaustion. And one of the things that made it real for me is you see a guy with a canteen, he throws water on his shoulder where he has his armor, and you hear it sizzle. They're halfway dead by the time they get to the battle, and they're just massacred by the Middle Eastern armies of Saladin. Before this battle takes place, valiant Orlando Bloom decides not to go because he says we need to defend Jerusalem. We need to keep the people safe. He refuses to go. But he has this conversation with his friend that he's made that is part of the Hospitaller order, the medics of the ancient world, so to speak. And this is the conversation they have. Valiant asked, you go with the army? And the Hospitaller says, my orders are with the army. Valiant says, you go to certain death. To which the Hospitaller replies, all death is certain. I will tell your father what I have seen you become. Do we realize that all death is certain? Do we realize that one day we won't be here? Do we realize that one day we are going to stand before God and give an answer for everything that we have done? Do we realize that one day we will have to stand before God? It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might be not for decades to come. On the other hand, just like that 22-year-old singer from The Voice, it might be today. And we don't know it. Are we ready to see God? And if we're not ready to see God, what is holding us back? What are we waiting for? And if we are ready to see God, but yet we have friends or neighbors or family members who don't know God, have we broached the subject with them? And I know that's hard. It can be uncomfortable. We trip over ourselves. But if God is the most important thing in our life, why wouldn't we want them to have it as well? All death is certain. A story, someone else told it, but I heard it, and every now and then it haunts my dreams. I don't know if it's because I am a preacher for a living or what, but it haunts my dreams. And that is, one day I'm waiting to see God, and I'll look over, and I see somebody who's being condemned, and it was somebody that I know. And it's not that I brought up the subject and they turned me down. It was that I never said anything to them in the first place. Death comes for us all. Are we ready? Death will come for our friends and family as well. Have we tried to tell them? When Belshazzar got the message from the hand, it was too late for him. It's not too late for us yet. But we haven't been guaranteed any time. Use wisely what we have been given, because all of our power and our very being is temporary. It's temporary. And it's gone. This morning we'd like to offer the invitation to those of you who might be hurting, who might be suffering. Maybe you don't know God. You're here today, so something brought you out. What about what's holding you back? We love to teach you. We love to study with you. We love to pray with you. We love to talk with you. We love to befriend you. Or you might wish to put your Savior on in baptism. If you've been thinking about it, again, what's holding you back? That's why Jesus came, you know. He came to give us life. He came so that our sins may be washed away. And without that cleansing, we cannot stand before God as righteous. What are we waiting for? But whatever you need, be it prayers, friendship, allowing us to assist you in your baptism, would you please come down as we stand and as we sing.